Welcome to Sleek Notes E-Commerce Boost Podcast, your chance to learn from the e-commerce experts so you can boost your business.
Hey everyone, so here's a statement worth noting. Copy is your online salesperson. Would you hire a sloppy salesperson in your physical store? No, didn't think so. Then why would you do that online? I recently had a chat with Joanna Wiebe, the co-founder of Copy Hackers and Airstory, who really shared some great insights on creating copy that actually converts. Now let's get that sloppy salesperson into gear. Joanna, welcome so much on the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Amazing. Can you just start out by presenting yourself?
Sure. So my name is Joanna Wiebe. I am the founder of Copy Hackers and the co-founder of Airstory, which is a writing platform for teams. I get to kind of travel around the world and talk to businesses and conference attendees about how to use their words to get more people to say yes more often.
Amazing. Cool. So let's start out just with a fairly simple question. Why should an e-commerce store optimize their copy?
Well, copy is your online salesperson. So you would train your sales team in a retail environment. And so you should also train your words to do the selling that a salesperson would do. Copy scales really well. You don't need to hire salespeople when you have copy doing the work online. That's the whole point with e-commerce, right? Is to get people to buy your stuff online. So if you can make your words convince people better and more frequently, then you can increase revenue really directly.
Cool. Makes total sense. So I've done a bit of research and I know you operate with 3 copywriting practices. What are those?
Well, the core of the 3 copywriting principles that you're referring to are really to start with a messaging hierarchy, which really just means have a sort of framework in place for the order in which your messages need to appear on the page or in the email. Then be specific, that's huge, and use calls to value, not just calls to action.
Cool. During my research, I stumbled across the work you did for the company called Sweatblock, and I really found that interesting. So I think we're just going to really use that as an example throughout the interview. Can you just tell me what their issue was?
Yeah, a similar issue to what everybody has online. They weren't converting as well as they wanted to. They were still doing very well, but there's always room to grow and optimize. And so many of the technologies that we have online can help us do that. And of course, the ability to update your website quickly makes it easier to optimize. To do A/B testing makes it easier to optimize as well. So we were just looking to increase paid conversions for them on their homepage, which acts like a landing page. So they would drive a lot of traffic to it. It's an e-commerce product. It's a single, it's basically it's deodorant or antiperspirant, for people who sweat excessively. So they have what's called hyperhidrosis. Even if it's not diagnosed, they might sweat on their hands, on their face, underarms, of course, behind their knees. And it makes life very awkward and embarrassing for them. So Sweatblock answers that problem by helping you sweat less. So we wanted to get Sweatblock into the hands of more people who had that problem and needed their solution.
Interesting. And just in short, what was the result of your work?
Well, we did a couple iterations on their homepage. So we ran one test, which is the one I think we're going to be talking about here today, which brought in 108% lift in paid conversions. Basically means we doubled revenue for them with this one test that we did. Then we did a second test on top of that and further optimized, brought another lift in of about 50% after that.
In order to find out what copy should go on the page, it might be a good idea to get acquainted with the message hierarchy. Feeling lost? Joanna's got your back.
Well, so your messaging hierarchy is really the thing to think about when you're organizing your messages on the page. What is the order in which your ideal prospect needs to see the messages communicated in order for you to really kind of get inside their head and pull them through a narrative, essentially. Now, the narrative doesn't have to mean like a story, but it has to mean what should they be feeling and what order should they feel it, so that by the time they're at the end of your copy, they're ready to move on to what's next. And in this case, what's next was actually getting them to buy online at that moment. So we want to think through. I know when I work with and have worked with clients in the past, and copywriters as well, just in coaching them, a lot of people think that there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason to what goes on the page. People will lead with the thing they think is most important, like the biggest message. Like if you have a discount available, they think they should lead with the discount. But we say, okay, hold on, let's back up. And let's not just lead with the thing that you think is going to sell them immediately, but what is the conversation that's happening in their head? How can we match that conversation and then move them toward a place where we're really kind of walking them through a conversation? Again, this is Copy as your online salesperson. So what would a salesperson do? You wouldn't just walk up to somebody who comes into your store and say like, hey, 25% off, bye, right? Like you wouldn't. You'd be like, I mean, maybe if you're schlocking some weird goods where you're like, I don't know why you would even buy this. But if there's a reason people are there, if they're there to solve a problem, you would do a lot of like, oh, okay, like you'd try to join them where they're at. You try to understand what they're thinking, and then you'd walk them through all of their desires, their objections, all of those things until you get to a place where they're in agreement that moving forward is the right decision to make. So a messaging hierarchy can help you move people through that conversation.
And is that hierarchy individual for different companies, or is it basically the same for each company?
Well, it can depend, right? So when we talk about a messaging hierarchy, we are also at the same time often talking about a framework. So a framework is something for copywriting is something like problem, agitation, solution. So that would be like, okay, we're going to open the page up by identifying the prospect's problem. And then we're going to agitate that problem, really make them feel it on the page by giving them specific examples. And then we're going to introduce the idea of solving that problem, at which time we're going to talk about our product and really get into like demoing the product, do like the why, try, buy kind of thing. That's what we'll do. So that's like the framework, this problem, agitation, solution. Another one is attention, interest, desire, action. That's a really common one for like newer copywriters generally start there. But there are all these frameworks and they line up with your messaging hierarchy. So for a messaging hierarchy, you might then say, okay, well, if we're going to use problem, agitation, solution, here are the messages that we know we want to get out there. So our primary message to get out, if we're looking at pain, what is the number one pain that people are feeling that our problem or that our product is going to solve? So we'd have to choose the pain that is most visceral or more likely to be the one that's going to actually like join people where they're actually at. And that's how the messaging hierarchy and the framework work together. But you can't just have a framework or you can't just have a messaging hierarchy. They have to come together. So it's a little bit theoretical, but if you are writing your e-commerce landing page or product detail page and you're not thinking through the framework to use and the hierarchy of messages, your page won't come together as well as if you do think of those two things.
Here's something tons of websites do, and you might be doing it too. Adding a header saying what is and then the name of your product or service. Now that's a problem, and according to Joanna, it just isn't good copy. Here's the solution.
Well, when it comes to like the what is sweat block copy, people default to this, and it's really simple. People like to default to asking a question, right? Especially for headers or like on the sweat block page, that's a crosshead, or a crosshead is sometimes called a subhead. It's just one of those bigger lines of copy that as you move down the page that introduces like a new section. So that's called a crosshead. So this what is sweat block was the crosshead that was introducing people to what sweat block is. When I look at things like those sorts of questions, I call that placeholder copy, right? That's the copy that you put down on the page when you're writing your first draft and you're like, okay, this section's going to be about explaining what sweat block is. You put this question in the crosshead, what is sweat block? And then you answer it. Okay, fine. That's fine for a first draft. That is not the published draft that you want to go out with, though. A really easy solve for that. And again, the reason that that's not a good one is because what is sweat block? How are you helping me as your busy prospect figure out if this is right for me? All you're doing is telling me what I'm about to look at. You're not really actually helping me move along in the conversation. The pace is off. It's written more for the person who's doing the writing than it is for the person who's doing the reading or who's considering buying this product. So our really simple solve for this is just answer that question. So if the question is what is sweat block, the answer that we had is the sweat block towelette is your little secret. That was our new crosshead that we used to replace what is sweat block. So again, it's the sweat block towelette ... your little secret. What's good about that is what is sweat block as a line of copy or the crosshead is trying to get you to read the next line, right? It's a really nice, valiant attempt to get you to read the next line, but it doesn't really make you want to read the next line. It forces you to, but it doesn't make you want to. Ours also forces you to read the next line while making you want to because you're kind of intrigued. The sweat block towelette, your little secret. Kind of like, okay, tell me more about this little secret. And so that's really our challenge, our problem with that crosshead, and then how we solved it.
Amazing. So I know this sort of taps into one of the things I know really into, to turn vague copy into specific copy. Do you have any other examples of how to turn vague copy into specific?
Yeah, I mean, and this is what we do across all of the copywriting we do, and I strongly recommend it for everybody, whether you're writing your own copy, or someone else to write your copy for you, is to go through and do what's called just a specificity sweep. Like, can you go back through after you've written your first draft or your second draft, can you go back through and look for ways to add in specifics? Now, specifics bring ideas to life on the page. So an example in the sweat block case is there was this crosshead that read up to 7 days of sweat relief. Okay. And then it has like this sort of calendar. It's not really a calendar. It's just got these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 underneath it. But the idea there is that you're going to get up to 7 days of sweat relief. Again, the line is up to 7 days of sweat relief. It's lacking specificity. The problem there is 7 days is nice and specific. Great, I can picture 7 days. I don't know what sweat relief looks like. And my job as your prospect is not to sit there and dream up what sweat relief might look like. I'm more likely to look at that, not feel or think anything and keep reading on, or like just start scrolling now because nothing's really speaking to me. So we go in, and this is something that's super easy for anybody to do, is you go in and you replace that vague idea with something that's just plain specific. And this means you just have to know your audience relatively well to know what sweat relief in this case looks like for them. So really, what does it look like? So we replaced that with, instead of up to 7 days of sweat relief, which was in the control, we replaced it with get up to 7 days of dry high fives, hugs, and hoorays. And so this is us talking specifically like what's a dry high five? I can picture high-fiving. I can picture hugging. I can almost picture hooraying, and that's just like an emotional sort of play there. But sweat relief as a concept versus dry high five or dry hug, that is something that's far more specific, and I can actually picture it in my life. And if I suffer from hyperhidrosis and I don't like raising my arm to high five, or I'm scared to hug somebody too close because I might be damp and that'll come off on their clothing, that's going to feel more real to me. So that's an example of how to get more specific. And it doesn't have to require a lot of words. It just has to require that you allow yourself to really get inside your prospect's mind and use those specific examples.
Oh, wow, that's brilliant. I really like that example. So another thing I know loads of copywriters struggle with, calls to action. What did you do to optimize them on Sweatblock's site?
So a call to action, we like to think of a call to action as a call to value when you're closer to the top of the funnel. So if we think of top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel should have calls to action. So the action might be order now or buy now. Once you're actually at the point where you're ready to enter your credit card information, that button copy needs to be exactly what people expect. So that could be, again, order now, buy now, add to cart. That's when you're at bottom of funnel, right? That's when you're actually ready to move forward with the purchasing process. When it's the parts that come before it, top of funnel and middle of funnel, we recommend, and again, we've tested a bajillion buttons, so this is recommendations based on more than just the Sweatblock example that we're talking about today. But we talk about calls to value. So a call to value is like, what's the thing that you're actually going to get out of the action you're going to take? So don't stop at the action that's about to happen, like clicking a button, but move your prospect toward visualizing the value they're going to get. And so for us, that means like we replaced the button copy with, what was the control? Let me just I don't recall what the control button was. I think it was order now or add to cart for Sweatblocks, to buy Sweatblock. We replaced it with sweat less, live more. And that's more of a call to value, right? The value I'm going to get out of it is sweating less. There's another one that we did, which was control your sweat, order now. And that's the call to value that's combined with the call to action when you get further toward the bottom of the funnel. So if I've already read through most of your page and I'm getting ready to like, okay, this is sounding good, I'm getting ready to buy now, then we combine the call to value with call to action. Again, that copy was control your sweat, order now. The value there is I'm going to control my sweat and the action is I'm going to order now. So I can move confidently forward with that. So that's the difference between a call to action and call to value.
Great. And I'm just thinking, how can other e-commerce sites do the same to sort of identify where do we need a call to value? Where do we need a call to action?
Yeah, really just look at your where people are in your funnel. And this could be just as simple as drawing out that funnel where top of funnel is maybe they're newer to your product, your brand. Maybe they're just starting to feel some pain and looking for a solution. But by the time they've clicked through a few pages, or if it's a long form sales page or like a long Amazon page, I know you can't control the calls to action on Amazon, but one of those longer pages where you can do more selling on it, the more they've read, the more likely they are ready. As a general rule, this is not always, but as a general rule, the more they've read, the better prepared they are for a call to action. The less they've read, the more we need to talk about the value they're going to get in their lives. Understanding that all your prospect truly cares about, the thing that will move them most the majority of the time, is how things are going to make their lives better. So a call to value helps me make my life better because I'm not just clicking to buy now. I'm being reminded of the value this is going to bring to my life when I buy now. I don't have to think about the buying action. The buying action isn't the point. The point is getting that value in my life as soon as possible. So just really plot out your funnel. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just like draw a simple funnel, identify where people are actually at when they're reading your copy or about to click that button. And if they're further up in the funnel, like they're on your homepage and they should click through to your product detail page, then read to the bottom of it and then click at the bottom of it, just identify, okay, if they haven't read that much, use a call to value. If they've read a lot, use a call to action as a general rule of thumb.
Great, really good. So I'm just thinking, if I owned an e-commerce store, let's say selling shoes, I don't necessarily see a pain point as clear as, for instance, Sweatblocks. So how do you identify what pain points you need to address? Because obviously in the case with Sweatblocks, that's pretty obvious. People don't want to sweat a lot.
Yeah, and I get this a lot. And I think the problem is, so you don't always have to do problem agitation solution. That's just a framework that we used for Sweatblock. It's a really good one because they're solving a pain so clearly. And if your product if your product was born to solve a pain versus like to delight a person, problem agitation solution is a great place to go. If you're doing something delightful, you can then lead with more of an attention, interest, desire, action. So you want to open with that attention. So how are you going to grab their attention? And that could be something to do with someone else who's worn your shoe, like the shoe, like let's say you're selling shoes, they're heels, and it just so happens that some Instagram star wore them. Obviously, it'd be great to open with something that speaks to, if that's going to grab your prospect's attention, then you could do that. But you don't always have to open with pain. It's a really nice place to go, though. Otherwise, yeah, there's other frameworks that you can use to open with. But point being that you do need to grab their attention somehow. Now, what we see on a lot of e-commerce sites is on that product detail page, so much of it just comes from the original vendor, like the person who created the product, and you're reselling it on your site. And you take exactly what they have and you put it on the page, including in like the H1 or the header for the product detail page. But you can do so much to optimize that. And we see some really high converting people like on Amazon doing exactly that. You don't just want to leave your product name. You might want to use your product name at the start of the headline because it's good for SEO purposes. If you have, 6-inch stilettos worn by Kim Kardashian, you would probably want to lead with that, unless your audience doesn't like Kim Kardashian, but you probably want to lead with that in your header. So it doesn't have to be pain. You just have to think clearly through what it is you need to say, instead of just kind of throwing down whatever you feel like, which is where most people go.
Fantastic. Really good input. So just to sort of end this interview, what 3 things would you definitely look at if you were to optimize, let's say, my fictional online shoe store, that maybe other e-commerces can do themselves and apply to their own businesses?
Yeah. So I'd start with the 3 things that I mentioned out of the gate. Can we optimize the messaging hierarchy here? Can we use a better framework? Are we using a framework at all? Can we go through and be more specific? And can we convert some of our calls to action into calls to value? Those are really those aren't the only things, but there's so many things that you can do that as long as you start here, as long as you start with these 3, you will already find yourself far ahead of where you were before. So, and then you can go on and increase your, copywriting skills, just keep working on it because again, copy is your online salesperson. So it makes sense to keep training yourself on writing better copy so it sells better. But I would just start there. And I know like the term messaging hierarchy might feel like, oh, forget it. I'm not going to bother with that. If that doesn't work for you, don't call it that. Just go with the order of messages or what people need to see or the order they need to see it in. But whatever it is, just start with those 3 things. And then from there, you can expand and test new stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joanna. That was really, really cool.
Thank you.
That's all for today. I hope you got loads of good ideas as to how you can turn vague copy into specific copy. Before you leave, don't forget to give this podcast a nice rating. I'll see you shortly for yet another episode of E-Commerce Boost.
This session of E-Commerce Boost was produced by Sleeknote. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on tactics and strategies that'll help boost your e-commerce.